Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's Inspiring Leadership podcast. I'm really thrilled to have Matt Alder. Matt is both a genius as podcast. He was one of the early podcasters. He's done 10 years, 760 episodes. Legend. Like that's twice what I've done. Really fascinating guy. Talent acquisition, big thing that he's good at. Futurist. He's a speaker. He's an author. Matt, welcome to the Inspiring Leadership podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be the one answering the questions rather than asking them for a change.
Which one do you like the most, asking or answering?
Probably asking because I do so much of it, and I'm fascinated by people and finding out about them. But it's just a nice change to
Yeah.
answer them for a change and find out stuff about myself.
So, do I really think that? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, one of my reasons for going to sort of video and then podcasts is I'm dyslexic. I only discovered it. I think it took to about the age of 35 before I knew how to spell dyslexic, and then 36 before I realized its impact on my early education and why I'd struggled so much. But I think a number of people who do podcasts also might be on the spectrum of dyslexia or whatever. Do you think you are?
I have ADHD. I don't know
Hmm.
if that's quite the same thing, which is interesting because I think that's actually one of the reasons that I've stuck at podcasting so long and carried on doing it because it's something that really interests me. I actually used to be a blogger before I was a podcaster, so
Hmm.
I had quite a successful blog, 10, 12 years, right back at the beginning of blogging. And we'll probably find out in this conversation. I like to do things first and disrupt things. That's kind of a real motivation for me. So I was a blogger, and I just got a little bit burnt out being a blogger. I just kind of found it quite difficult to keep writing continually, and I started podcasting because it weirdly it seemed easier even though it's more work. So, I think that's the thing about it, and I think it was because of that audio format. It's like, I'm gonna have a conversation, and we can record the conversation, edit the conversation, and you can create something out of that rather than, writing or doing something different. So, yeah, similar, a kind of a similar, a similar kind of motivation there.
Yeah, and as a podcast geek, I mean, do you just do it as 60 minutes? Do you do longer? And do you make smaller forms of it?
So I've discovered over time that my particular audience responds best to podcasts that are around 20-25 minutes. So it puts me on the shorter end of the podcasting spectrum. It doesn't really match my podcast listening because I tend to like to listen to really long podcasts that get into a lot of detail. But with my audience and my topic, that seems to be the sweet spot. I think a lot of people listen to the podcast when they're walking the dog, when they're commuting, when they're traveling, and that's just a nice length because it means that you can complete the podcast within that activity, but it's not so short that you have to keep kind of changing, keep trying to changing them. So they're about 25 minutes long. It gives us the opportunity to probably explore one thing in depth. So they're quite focused as well.
Yeah, that's good. Well, let's talk about what you do and how you help leaders and teams, because the
Sure.
podcast is about inspiring leadership and very much around people. And you're looking at the future of talent. What is it that you do most for leaders and teams?
So I really help companies understand what the future is going to look like for talent, for HR, for talent acquisition, all of those kind of things. I think if I had my time again, particularly with the podcast, I'd probably call it something different other than recruiting future because it's much more about work and talent and all of that holistically. And I suppose in some ways I'm kind of that intersection between talent and technology. So um, over the years, it's been looking at how is the internet changing the way that we work? How is social media changing the work? How is mobile changing the way that we work? Cloud computing, big data, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're obviously very firmly on AI and its kind of implications. And I think that it just, particularly with AI, it kind of we can think about talent in a very different way. And I'm not sure that enough leaders think about talent strategically. They'll say they do. They'll say that people are the most important part of their business, but have they really analyzed the skills that they have within their business, the skills that they're going to need within their business in the next few years, and really thought about how they're going to make sure that that's there? And I think if you look at some of the most successful companies, they do that because they're anticipating the market. They're making sure that they have things in place to get those skills in very quickly, or they're developing those skills in their business and kind of really driving things forward. So, to me, I think sometimes when people talk about talent, recruitment, HR, it can be seen as tactical, process driven, cost center, all of those kind of things. But actually, it's a key strategic part of the business. And I don't think there are enough conversations about that CEOs are in. I think the other thing about it is there's a thing around here about cultural norms. So everyone has been through a recruitment process. Everyone who has a job has been through a recruitment process. If they're a CEO, they've probably been through a few of different types of things, which means everyone's got an opinion
Yeah.
about how recruitment works and what it looks like. And very often those opinions can be very, very much out of date, or not really very helpful. So sometimes it's difficult to have conversations with people about this because they've got very sort of fixed ideas about talent, recruitment, HR, how it all works, essentially.
Very interesting point. You know that I wrote a quick newsletter, and it was about the dangers of confusing opinion with fact
Yeah,
and masquerading it as fact, but it's actually just an opinion with nothing much to back it up. And I think we're all very quick to think we're experts on people because we are one, as they
yeah,
say, because we
yeah,
is
yeah,
one.
absolutely.
And and so for you, it must be really interesting to give them some facts and give them some data and say, look, I think, because we can't be sure what the future is, the most certain thing about the future is we really don't know what it is and we're going to get it wrong. But um, as you look at AI, which has, of course, become the latest buzzword, but
Yeah,
it is going to have such a huge impact. I'm well aware of that. And I'm just thinking, in a broad sense, and this is probably a paper in its own right from you, what do you see as the known professions like, I don't know, let's say accountancy and banking and other areas where even legal side, where a lot of it can be swept away and done by AI. And there's
yeah,
the young bankers who collect a book of all the facts and data. It's but done by AI. Just type it in and you get
yeah,
the data.
yeah.
What do you think is going to get swept away by it, and what do you think will stand the test of time? I'm quite curious about the world of leadership development and coaching and facilitation. Can that all be done by AI? Maybe it will. So just share your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we could sort of look at the way that business works, and I think we can probably say that, at least in theory, everything that can be automated probably will be automated. Now, the caveat to that is there's a bit about where does that go too far? Where does that make people uncomfortable? Where does that eliminate humans from something that humans should be in? So it's kind of working. It's sort of working back from there. I think it's the most disruptive thing I've seen in business ever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Far more disruptive than the internet has been. If we think about the disruption, the opportunities that's caused, that's quite a big thing. That's quite a big thing to say. It There's lots of aspects to it. So as you say, I think there are some jobs that are obviously in line for automation.
And
There's the
which ones would you go for?
I think anything with those kind of repeatable tasks, or that rely on research based things, or looking for patterns, or that kind of stuff. So accountancy, lawyers, um,
Medical, quite a lot of the medical side.
some medical stuff. All of those kind of things. Customer service to a point, recruitment, etc., etc. So I think there's a bit about the understanding, well, actually, where do we need humans in the loop here? Because I think the best example I've heard people give is, when you get on a plane and actually the plane can fly itself. So, and the autopilot will probably be on for most of the flight. And if they wanted to, the plane could probably take off and land by itself. But um, very few people will want to get on a plane without a pilot.
Mhm.
I would suspect. So I think that even if AI can do a job, there's a sense of a human kind of is around if anything goes wrong, or all that sort of stuff. So I think that's kind of part of it. The most interesting thing though is I wrote an article on this actually a few weeks ago, is whether it actually kind of redefines some of these jobs altogether, and are we actually doing things that just actually don't contribute to anything, are dealing with broken systems or all that sort of stuff. So, from a recruitment example, um, recruitment as a process hasn't really changed in hundreds of years. So it's built on assumptions about the world that AI might change. So, we go through a recruitment process. We ask people to apply, whether that's, in 20 years ago, that was through newspapers and letters. Now it's through the internet. We sift through those replies to find the best candidate. Then we put them through some kind of process to do that. And it's almost like, what if we were in a world where um, every single person had access to every single job and every single employer had access to every single person through AI? If we had a talent agent, for example, that scanned the market looking for those jobs that were a great fit for us, it's like, what would be left from the recruitment process then? Because actually, a lot of that is just being done by those systems, and a lot of
The system is matching you.
yeah, and a lot of the things that we might sort of stick to and think that's an essential part of the recruitment process, it's not, because we've invented that because we are at this kind of capacity limit. So we can't get our job in front of every single qualified candidate that is out there. It's not possible. We have to rely on people looking for a job, or we reach out to the people that we can find. And that creates jobs and tasks that might not exist in the future. And I think that's probably the same for every profession. There are things that we do because of the constraints under which we work. And if AI removes some of those, then those jobs look very different. And I think that's the really interesting bit. And it's I think you can see the general direction of it, but the
Mm.
speed at which it will happen is the big unknown.
Yeah.
We could be still talking about this as potentially happening in 5 years' time,
No, no. It'd
or
be quicker than that. I
it
think
might
it.
happen in 5 months' time. So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's the thing. That's the thing about it. So it kind of makes that thinking about talent and skills in a business even more important. It's just because things are changing so quickly. It's like, how do we have if we're recruiting people, what are we recruiting them for? We're recruiting them not necessarily for the hard skills that they have right now, because that they could be out of date in a few months' time. But we're recruiting people for human aspects of what they do, or their ability to adapt or change, or whatever that is. And I think it's a big shift that not every company is thinking about. And then there's a balance about how many humans are we hiring AI agents from people to do things. It throws everything up in the air in quite a disruptive way.
Well, look, I think it's really interesting, and we could have the whole of the podcast. We could talk about this, and we'll come back to it. But I think it is very interesting on the human aspect of inspiring leadership, getting people to do what they don't want to do,
Yeah.
but making them feel good about it in the process, and inspiring and motivating people to give discretionary life effort and energy to customers and to people to do things, and to cope with unexpected challenges, find teachable moments, learning and action, adapt to it, and be thinking ahead like you do in your futurist kind of thinking about talent. So as we look at humans and leadership, how do you think AI will change the way that you can find the right kind of people to be the CEOs and the inspiring leaders of these organizations? What do you think?
I think it's the kind of ability to break down what is it about those people that makes them, makes them special. What are those kind of intrinsic things? And I think one of the things that's really fascinates me about this aspect of work is actually the science for this has been in place for a very, very long time. We've got decades long science around assessment and human performance and how we kind of break that down. But
Mm,
actually, not much of that science ever really makes it into most people's kind of recruitment
mm,
processes, which is a strange anomaly. And I think it's just that the way that AI can sort of find patterns in huge amounts of data, I think is is a bit about perhaps understanding leadership better than we already understand it.
mhm,
As an example, I have 10 years worth of podcast episodes, which is 300 hours of audio and 3 million words of transcript. I've measured it, and I recently, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the show, I got one of the deep research AI tools to actually map that whole back catalogue.
mhm,
And what I've done is that obviously over the 10-year period, I've spoken to a lot of CHROs, heads of talent acquisition, and been able to kind of actually map what makes the ones who are successful the most successful. And I think it's just the ability to look at that kind of huge sort of data sets and spot those patterns, which I think might tell us quite a lot about leadership and success that we perhaps don't know at the moment.
You've really excited me because my third book is The CEO's Compass, How to Navigate Teams Through Turbulent Times, which is quite relevant with Donald and all that he's doing,
Mhm.
and Putin and Xi Jinping, etc. And I did exactly that. I used Sonics to get all the transcripts. I then combined them. I put them in Google LM Notes. And while I'm writing the book with my own stories and things like that, I can call on it for what are the top things that CEOs find in this area? What's their, and there it is. It very quickly from all that, in my case, 400 episodes, each 400 hours of recording, it can give me what these inspiring the leaders who others find inspiring. So this is why I choose them. It's not that they tell me, "Hey,
Yeah,
Jonathan, I'm inspiring. I want to be on your show." I get those. They're called narcissists, and they go, "I should be on your show because I'm brilliant and I'm really inspiring."
yeah,
I want just like you're going to recommend a couple to me shortly. That's what works when one leader thinks another is inspiring. You know it's good. Um, there is that story, and you in talent would be amused by this one. The story of the Dutch admirals. Have you ever heard this one?
tell me more,
It,
maybe.
it rings a bell, maybe. So, true story in the Dutch Navy, two young midshipmen, and they became admirals in the Dutch Navy, the top two admirals. And what they would do every time, let's call them Matt and Jonathan, that someone would say to Matt, you're really good. You really know your stuff about sailing and the Navy and ships and things. And he goes, yeah, well, thank you. But actually, Jonathan taught me a lot about this, and I really respect and admire him. It's from him I learned it. And the same would be repeated by Jonathan because he genuinely wasn't, didn't make it up. If they made it up, it wouldn't have worked. But they respected the other and they would never take the glory for themselves. They would always give credit to the other. And they kept getting promoted
Yeah,
because
yeah,
if
yeah.
I tell you I'm fantastic, it's no good. But if someone else tells you I'm fantastic, then you know you're onto something. And that third party referral, maybe in the AI tool, who says these people are good? But I am fascinated by what you're touching on because we've designed a psychometric around what makes inspiring leadership for individuals, teams, and 360. And I'm sure AI could make it even better, making use of all the stuff
Yeah.
that we've learned from others. And and if that was part of a recruitment process, that would be really interesting. So I'm sure it's all, as you say, it's already been done. Just
Mm.
needs someone to bring all the patterns together. So I'm very
Yeah,
excited.
I think it's that thing about, if you think about what good recruiters do, they're looking for patterns, they're doing all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people are very, they really kind of hold on to that. They're like, AI will never be better at me than this because I have all of this experience and all this success. And I think there's two things about that. First of all, they're not taking into account their own bias, the biases that they have, and obviously AI can be biased as well. That's kind of a separate conversation. But at the end of the day, if you can take a job role and benchmark a million CVs against it in 10 seconds,
Mm,
no human can do that.
no.
I think that's the difference, just the volume, the volume of sort of data that and the ability to just see things that maybe beyond the human brain on a particular day is the exciting thing.
And that is really truly exciting because it's almost that old saying that there's a job out there for you somewhere. There really is a job with your name on it. Uh,
Yeah, and that's a big thing for me actually when I'm sort of talking about recruitment. There's almost two scenarios of the future. There's the sort of a recruiting dystopia and a recruiting nirvana. And recruiting dystopia is where people don't think about talent in a strategic way. They automate it with machines, but don't really pay much. Don't really think about the implications of it, and it just means that the whole experience for the candidates is completely depersonalized. There's no strategic value from recruiting. It's kind of a horrible situation, which I can see happening. The other one is this kind of recruiting nirvana where it's like exactly that. It's like, the right jobs for the right people at the right time. And brilliant from a, job seeker employee perspective, but amazing from a company perspective because, if you're talking about inspiring leadership, having people working for your business and it's exactly the right job for them at exactly the right
mm,
time,
mm,
that's going to give you the extra discretionary effort and everything that you need to kind of really achieve that. So I think it's not technically possible right now, but I can see how it
yeah.
could be in the future.
I think it's really exciting. And then there's another angle, which with your futurist head on, I'd be interested in your view, which is that I do get concerned when organizations, particularly those run by private equity, go, Matt and Jonathan, Matt's the CEO, Jonathan's the CFO. We're not making enough money. Fire them both, get 2 new ones in, then fire them, get 2 new ones in. Like, where's the place for development? Because I know, looking back on my 18-year-old Jonathan, now I'm 63, as a young army officer, I was a pretty poor leader.
Mm.
But I've learned a lot from my mistakes, and I've been developed over time, and I can do something now which I could never do then. So what scope and what hope is there to give room to allow people to be developed? And will they go, like the private equity, fire them, get a new one in? There's got to be someone who's got this skill. Give us that, get rid of this one. Do you think that's dead? Do you think there will be development?
I think it's 2 bits. It's 2 bits to it. I think that we are rapidly approaching a time where the half-life of skills is so short. It's not technical skills in particular. It's just not possible to do that, because you'd be changing your whole company every 3 months or whatever. So I think there's a bit about a necessity to help people develop, or hire people with things like learning agility who can develop themselves. I think that kind of becomes imperative, because things just move too quickly for humans to, if you always have this pipeline of talent where you can just replace people. What concerns me is, entry level talent and development, and developing 18-year-olds to, be the leaders of the future, because there's kind of a perfect storm going on here at the moment. So, a lot of the kind of the AI systems that we're putting into companies at the moment are taking the tasks away that you would normally give to an entry level person. At the same time, companies are advertising entry level jobs that they want 3 years relevant experience in the same industry, for an entry level job. This almost this culture of internships and kind of stuff has kind of gone mad. So at the moment, I think there's a big issue with people leaving school, leaving university, and also then I think the other thing is the education system isn't giving people the skills for the modern work. It's giving them skills for work about 100 years ago. And I think those 3 things together cause a real issue with that sort of entry level part of businesses. And I think some businesses are doing a great job at looking at that and thinking about it and saying, well, actually, we need to develop the talent of the future, if not for our business, but just for the good of businesses, moving forward. So I think there's a question about what happens there.
Yeah.
And we want experienced people who can add this human element on top of AI, but it's like, where do they get that experience from if those jobs aren't there? And that, I think, is a problem that isn't really being addressed at the moment.
And you touched on something I mentioned to you before we started. I was honored to be keynote to all the headmasters and headmistresses of the boarding schools in the country, in the UK, and super clever bunch of people. My challenge to them was that there are 2 skills which we'd really value in business, which I don't remember being taught, or I'm not hearing them being still taught at school, apart from Nancy Klein, who was a teacher himself. And one of them is really being good at listening.
Yeah.
And the other one is learning how to think for yourself.
Yeah.
And really to think, not just go through a rote process and a system, but actually creative thinking, new thinking, and being given the time and space. That link to the next thought and a third thought. And the second thought is, I always say to leaders, knowledge, skills, and attitude. Half for attitude. Knowledge and skills can be developed, but always half for attitude, far for attitude. And if they are the toxic one in the team, if you're unlikely to change them.
Yeah.
Who thinks they can change a narcissistic president of a unknown country? Okay, you will not change them. Their attitude will not change. Knowledge and skills won't make a difference at all. They're still a narcissist with a huge ego. And then the other thing which people forget is, when I was in PricewaterhouseCoopers, we did some consulting work, and we looked at a topic of, when we take Matt, who's in this company, and he's doing a really great job as the CEO of this company, and then we bring him out, we lift him because he's really happy, but we want to go and get the best one. So we lift a happy one and his wife and family and all the rest, or a happy female with her partner, whoever it might be, whatever it might be, and we move them to the new company, how long before they're back up to the speed they were at in the last job? How long do you reckon it is?
I don't know. Tell me. That's
18 months to 3 years
yeah.
before they're back at their original performance, before they even exceed that. So it's a long delay time. And of course, it disrupts the whole network because new people, new networks, new friends, that kind of stuff to get them up to speed. And people think that instantly this guy will be at the level they were at before. It takes time. So I don't know, those three thoughts, just to play back anything that triggered for you.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's kind of when the pace of business is starting to move quicker than the pace of humans. And I think one of the most interesting books that I've read in the last 2 years, book by a guy called Morgan Housel. I think it's called The Same as Ever. He wrote a really brilliant book called The Psychology of Money, which is also interesting. And basically, he kind of points out that the human brain takes hundreds of thousands of years to evolve. So as humans, we still respond to situations in the same way that we responded to them 100,000 years ago. And he said that, you can't predict the future, but you can predict how humans are going to react to it because there are some patterns in there. So I think that, when things are moving this fast, it's quicker than humans can adapt to them. And I just think that we just need that more kind of holistic approach to development and career development and really understanding that. And I think we're soon approaching those days where that kind of off the shelf, I'm getting the perfect person who's going to be up to speed on day one, are starting to kind of slip away because also the context is so different each time. And I think that people don't pay enough attention to how much the context affects how people work because I certainly had a job once that looked like my dream job and it was awful because I was a terrible fit because the context was very different from the company I've been working at before and it just didn't work for me. And I think that those kind of nuances are just kind of really important. So yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think it's the thinking about kind of development over someone's career and is that something that they're responsible for and they have the tools to do themselves. Is it the company's job? Is it education's job? I think there's a question about where that sits and how we talk to people because I think lots of people who are in leadership positions now in their 50s or 60s have entered a very different workforce when they started, and I'm seeing quite a few people who are sort of being displaced through reorganizations or redundancies who've never been in that position before, and they're really kind of struggling because their map of how the world of work and careers work is massively out of date. So it's a conversation that needs to happen.
It really is, and you touch on such interesting areas. This is fascinating. I'm really enjoying this, Matt. I'm reminded of one of the futurists said, "This is the slowest it will ever be today."
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to get slower. Tomorrow is not a slower day.
No.
It's going to accelerate. And there was E.O. Wilson, the biologist who died a few years ago, and he said, "We have medieval institutions, godlike technology, but Paleolithic emotions."
Yeah, no, exactly that.
And this is the problem, this godlike tech
Mm.
which is taking over everything, but we've still got these medieval institutions which are by design, they have a legal identity, but they have no heart and they have no soul, which makes them psychopathic.
Mm.
So these
Mm.
corporations are psychopathic, will use
Yeah.
you, burn you, don't care really about you. They say they do. And we're lucky in some organizations that the leaders do genuinely care, but ultimately they're replaced by someone else and they don't. I don't know what thoughts come to you about that.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. That sums it up really, really, really well. And it with those companies as well, we've got generations who are coming into the workforce now who are looking for something different from their job. They're looking for meaning, but also they're entering a world of work that is already very what's the word, very brittle, very not there. So they're much more likely to walk out on a job because they're like, well, this company could fire me tomorrow anyway. It's just like I am resigned to the fact that my career is going to be a lot of moves into a lot of different places. So companies don't have the same hold on them as they perhaps did with a different generation. So yeah, I think that's the thing. And I think the whole thing about how do we get the best out of people in this world, and really align to where they want to be is a key part of it as well. And I think with the um, I talked about education, as it was preparing people for work 100 years ago. The interesting thing is the human response to technology. So I know a number of people who I'm not going to say who they are, who have pretty much outsourced their job to various types of AI without their company knowing, and they're not telling anyone about it now. Partly because there's a fear that if I tell my company, maybe I'm not allowed to do it, or actually they'll just outsource me to AI. I won't have a job. But I also think there's an element that people will do something with AI and it'll turn out really, really well. Um, and it suddenly feels like cheating. It's just
Mhm.
like, hang on, this would have taken me 2 weeks. It's taken me 3 minutes. I just have this sudden like this. I've done something wrong. This isn't right. I haven't put the amount of effort in that I should. And I think that's a very, as you say, it's a very human brain approach. We think about it as like, we go out and we hunt all day, we
Mm.
burn off calories, then we have more calories. And this is like, well, actually, this took me 2 minutes, and I didn't really do very much. Although I have the I had the knowledge to tell it what to do and the knowledge to know whether it was good or not, which is people overlook. And I think that's the thing about AI. We find it a very unnatural thing because we
This
don't put
is
the work in, as
This
it
is
were.
so true, and I have many stories to back what you've just said, and particularly when I think of some guys doing coding in different tech companies where I work with, and one of them said to me, I've got 8 hour shift or whatever it is. I get my work done the first 2 hours.
Mm, mm.
I spread it out over the day, but I've done it within the first 2 hours, and then I do some gaming um, because I'm bored. But of course, as I say, when they work out that they can be replaced by AI, their jobs will go. So it's only a matter of time before their game gets found out. Um, while I'm on holiday, I'll just get AI to answer my questions. Well, don't worry about coming back because we don't need you because AI has replaced your job and you're redundant.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Which is people responding to how companies have taught them. It's just like I've seen that happen. And I
okay.
think the other thing as well, there's a bit about how we think about work and performance,
Yeah.
and no matter what is said, there's still this sense about amount of hours that get put in, and dedication to something. And I think we've seen with all the headlines about return to the office and all this kind of stuff, there is a very some of the foundations about the way that we think about work are very much out of date.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing as well, because it's like if someone can do a brilliant job for me in 2 hours, rather than 10 hours, why are we wasting everyone's
You
time?
are spot on. And indeed, you're picking up a theme from Rommel. Rommel said there are four types of leaders. There are stupid and lazy leaders.
Yeah.
There are stupid and hardworking leaders. There's bright and hardworking leaders, and there's bright and lazy leaders. He said, take the stupid and hardworking ones and shoot them, get rid of them, and take
They
and
just
take
wait.
the bright and lazy one and
Yeah.
promote them to the highest ranks. Because if they can get the job done in 2 hours and they go and spend time with their family, good on them.
Yeah,
Get the
exactly.
job. Who's the stupid here?
Yeah.
Um,
That's very true.
let's talk about because I'm really enjoying this. There's so much we can talk about. Let's talk about a couple of leaders that you've worked with that you find inspiring that you'd like as your guests, Matt. And then I'll go a quick trip around the Inspiring Leadership Compass, the 8 points around inspired leadership, and how you see that a sort of tip or two you'd give people in the world of talent
Sure.
about solving it.
Sure.
So firstly, give me a couple of people that you've been impressed by.
Yeah, I've picked a couple of people that I've either worked with or sorry, who have been the CEO of the company that I've worked for. One of the things that I kind of really admire is people who, challenge these norms, who look for better ways of doing things, who ask all the right questions. So the first one is actually Bill Gates,
Mm-hmm.
who I know for many people can be quite divisive in some ways. The context in which I'm picking him is back in about 1998. I worked for what was at the time was the only private company that he had, which is a company called Corbis. So Microsoft who was running Microsoft at the time. That's publicly owned. And he kind of spotted what he thought was an opportunity, that he felt that people would be buying screens for their homes and have interchangeable pictures on them. Now, if you think about that now, it's like, well, we can't have that on my TV or have that on my iPad. But this is 25 years ago. So he went out and bought up the digital rights to the world's archive of photo and art and all this kind of stuff to sort of do this vision around these kind of screens. And I think by the time that I worked there, it was probably obvious that actually that wasn't the use case. And so for about 16 years, he effectively ran this kind of photographic business, disrupted the industry because it made it digital, because we had all these kind of digital versions of these pictures. So there's a bit about pivoting in there. So he just kept going and saw other opportunities. There's a bit about disrupting an industry that was probably prime for disruption in terms of making it better. But also there's a big bit of integrity about it as well, because he bought up these digital rights. He scanned millions and millions of archive pictures, and there's a particular archive called the Bettman Archive in the US, which has 11 million images in it, including some of the most iconic pictures of American history. And it was just kind of sitting in New York, degrading, rotting away. All these negatives are on glass plates and things like that. And as well as scanning all of those pictures, they built a kind of a permanent storage facility for them in a limestone mine or something in Philadelphia, which means that it was preserving that aspect of American history. So yeah. So in the context of that, I was just like, disruption, pivoting, but also real integrity about the importance of the things that he was dealing with. So I think he'd be my first one.
Hmm.
My second one is a guy called Jeff Taylor, who was the CEO of Monster. He when he set up Monster, the career site, it was within the first 50 sites of the internet. So no one really knew much about the internet or what it was for. Or what it would do. And it's quite difficult to sort of remember back and put yourself in that position, because a lot of it just sounds obvious now. It's like, of course this will happen. But at the time, we just did not know. And he did that with a view to making things better for job seekers. It's like, let's make things quicker rather than typing out CVs and posting them. Let's put this all online. Let's give people access to, a broader sphere of jobs. And, just an example of someone who was kind of up against every kind of institution that said this is
Hmm.
nonsense. Built a business, a really successful business, and kind of just really inspiring in terms of energy and vision and all that sort of stuff. And he's after a long time away from the industry, he's kind of coming back with a new startup because he's seen AI as another kind of massive sort of potential a bit of disruption. So and it's been interesting to watch his kind of come back and see the way he thinks about things, and still has that kind of energy and vision and stuff like that. So yeah, he'd be my second one.
Yeah, great. So let's go a trip around the Inspiring Leadership Compass. The first one you've touched on a bit with moral quotient. These are different quotients which are
Sure.
measurable in our psychometric, but also talk about in the CEO's compass of what makes high performing CEOs and teams. Um, what people should do when they let their values slip, because values are as we're seeing with people taking a knee to certain presidents in Russia and America, are your values for sale, your personal values and the values of your business. So what's your view on what people should do about their moral integrity, their moral quotient in this new world of talent and work?
I think it's just even more important, because I think ultimately it's the thing that you have, the thing that you own, that defines you and what you want to do. And I think when people kind of let go of that for whatever reason, I just never think it really turns out well.
Yeah.
Maybe it does in terms of financial reward or stuff like that, but it just doesn't. And I think you particularly see it with companies as well. I think you see it a lot with companies that were kind of founded, that were disruptive, that had sort of customers at the heart of what they do. Then they become really successful. The founder exits. They get sold to a global conglomerate, and then 5 years later, everyone hates them, and that's the kind of the end of it, because they've lost that essence. So to me, this is just the most important thing, because it's also the bit that makes you human and not an AI. So I would say that. I would say that it's just it's kind of a vital thing, and I think in the very chaotic world of work we're going into, you've got to have an anchor
Yeah.
to get you through.
I'm so delighted you say
And
that. And we've all made mistakes. We've all got things wrong. But um, as soon as you realize you've made a mistake, you have to apologize. You have to work really hard to rebuild trust. Because as we've seen, particularly recently, when countries turn on their allies and their neighbors, and
yeah,
trust is broken, it's going to take a long time to rebuild. The next one, you touched on this one as well. PQ, I call it, purpose and meaning quotient.
yes,
Um, Time and again, I'm coming across one or two people, midlife crisis. They're working, making a lot of money. They've got loads of money, but they're not seeing their family. And they're going, is this worth it? What am I doing here? Mark Twain said the two most important days in your life, the day you were born and the day you found out why. And many of them haven't found out why they were here. What are they doing? Is it to
yeah.
pay the mortgage? Any tip you'd give on purpose and meaning?
Yeah, again, I just think it's kind of a really it's kind of a really important thing, and I think it goes back to what I was saying about people are in their 50s or 60s and are suddenly displaced, or they're suddenly it's like, what have I been doing? What's been going on? And I think that um, the whole the whole world of work has shifted so much from just a generation ago. Your purpose was you had a job and that company looked after you and you had a career. It made sense. There were patterns and there were meaning within that kind of arc, and it was understood that that was the process that you were going through. So don't think people had quite the same crisis. But now there's just sort of nothing. There's kind of nothing beneath that, and which is why I think it's really important that people find that, because it's essentially what gives you energy. It what helps you it helps you kind of carry on. And again, it's a very human thing. It comes back to that Paleolithic brain. It's like the purpose was we get up, we go and find food, we stay alive,
Yeah.
and our brains haven't moved on, so they need that. And I don't think there's any judgment against people for getting to this point in their life and not having it, because it's just not really been something that's talked about, or they're just the structures have been there to kind of get people through. But now I think it's just kind of it's just a critical thing. And I think that really kind of asking questions and detaching yourself from things that you thought were true about the world is just a really important thing to do about that.
Oh,
And from my perspective, I went out and sort of started my business, having been sort of very senior within the businesses where I was. I went out and started my business 15 years ago because I just hit a point where I was like, I don't understand why I'm doing this.
mhm.
Um, and it's just very different. The world is as chaotic as ever, but you feel that you're in control and you know where you're going, and it just makes a massive difference to everything.
You're so right. And sometimes you meet wise, when the pupil is ready, the teacher appears. And I remember a time when I was an instructor at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, in my army career. And I thought I was God's gift. I'd had outstanding reports all the way through. I was sent to Top Gun school to be an instructor. I thought, yes, I've arrived. Look at me. I'm enormous. And I got an average report. I went, what do you mean I'm average? You are average compared to these guys because these are
Mm,
gods. And they
mm,
went on to be generals. But it was my crisis moment where I reached back to anybody who knew my father, who was killed when I was 3. He was a very inspiring leader, a fast jet pilot who others admired, and just killed so early in his career, saving the lives of 2 other pilots. I invited anybody who knew him to a lunch, and I had 20 pilots around me at this lunch. And one of them said, Jonathan, your father bought my ticket. I said, what do you mean? He said, your father died in my airplane. He should be having lunch with you today,
wow,
and I should be dead. I said,
wow,
how long have you been carrying that thought? He said,
yeah,
30 years. I said, well, look, for what it's worth from his son, that's what, as commanding officer, that's what he did. He made sure that his pilots were safe, and he was test flying your plane. It had the fault. The fault killed
mm,
him, not you. And the other guy was Bill, who's my father's co-pilot, navigator. And he said, Jonathan, this is a key moment for you. I think I now call it a teachable moment, but he said, you have a choice. You can be a victim. Poor me, no dad. Mum brought up 3 boys on her own, not much money. Everything goes wrong in life because I've not got a dad, and life's unfair. Or you can use your father and your mother, who's quite a philanthropist, to be your inspiration, the reason why you do what you do. Learn from your father and learn from other inspiring leaders and pay it forward to other people, which is why I do this podcast. I do it for free.
Mm, mm.
It's my way of giving back, and that gives my life meaning and purpose. If I
Yeah.
hadn't had that wisdom from that man at that time, I probably would have carried on longer in my army career. I stayed a couple more years and then went into business. But I think sometimes you need to listen. That someone's got a story for you if only you would listen. Like the
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
about the man who's drowning on the top of the roof. Do you remember that one? He's sitting on the top of his roof. There's a flood, and
Right.
and he's going, "God save me! God save me!" And a guy comes round in a little speedboat. Says, "Climb in." He says, "No, no, no! I'm waiting. God's going to be saving me." Okay, and then a helicopter comes hovering over, and a guy in a
Yeah.
winch, "Come in! We're going to lower it." No, no! God's going to save me. And then the tide comes up, and he
Yeah.
drowns. And he's up there at the gates, and he goes, "Why didn't you save me? Save you? I sent a man in a boat. I sent a helicopter. What other messages do you need? You
Yeah.
sometimes don't get the message from what's going on." What's your thought, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing. I think also sometimes you don't know why you do something, and then you kind of suddenly work it out. So, I've been working in the kind of recruitment space for most of my career. I think there's a bit at the beginning that I didn't, and it's not really the most glamorous place to work in sometimes. And over the years, I've had lots of offers to move to different industries and do different things. I've seen, colleagues do that, former, people that I know, kind of move off into other industries and seemingly become incredibly successful and all this kind of stuff. And I never have, and I've never really quite understood why. Probably until very recently, where I realized that, and I think it was AI that made me realize this, where I could suddenly see a path to recruitment working for everyone. And I kind of realized that actually that's what I've been doing all this time, is to try and fix recruitment so it
Mm.
works for everyone. And it's a very long game. And I think it probably goes back to, when I first left university, couldn't find a job, thought it was, graduating in a recession from a non-fashionable university, and it was just not set up for understanding how work worked and how those things were a massive disadvantage to me. And it just seemed ridiculous. And I think, and also probably, people in my family being made redundant when I was younger and all that sort of stuff. So I've kind of realized, probably very belatedly, that actually that is a key thing for me. And it's only now that I can kind of see the way that actually might happen, that I've sort of, that's why I'm still doing this. That's why I'm still doing this.
Yeah, it's good when you realize how. Um, Health quotient is one of the elements which isn't in many leadership models. Physical, mental health, and well-being. You and I have both seen people burn themselves out,
Yeah.
never take a day off, work all hours. What's your view on the importance of health and well-being in talent?
I just think I think it's incredibly important, and it's been great to see that. Certainly, probably since the pandemic, it comes up much more. People really think about it. I'm not sure that companies properly respond to it. They might give it some lip service and all this sort of stuff, but I think there's still some work to do about understanding what that really means. But again, also, science has moved on. We were talking before we came on air about, we've both got Whoop bands that measure, all of our vital signs and all that sort of stuff. So I think we've just got a lot more data and scientific knowledge about what how much kind of physical and mental health play into performance. And I just think it's critical, because I think you can't, you can't have that kind of longevity in performance if you don't, look after all of those different things. You can, burn brightly for a certain amount of time, but at the end of the day, a working career is very long these days.
Yeah.
Retirement is an uncertainty.
Yeah. What
And I
do you
think,
do, Matt, to keep fit and healthy? And obviously, the Whoop's telling you what the results are, but what do you do to keep yourself healthy? You're self-employed. The pressure's on you. You got to make the numbers. You can't rely on many others. So, what do you do?
yeah, so I try and walk everywhere as much as I can. I think it's one of the things where, if you can't get out and do exercise, then walking everywhere is a great thing to do. Having meetings when you're walking, thinking when you're walking, all those kind of things. I suppose from the mental health side, big fan of meditation, hypnosis,
Mhm.
those kind of things. I think one of the ultimate thing for me is I love going in flotation tanks,
Oh
which
yeah, yeah.
people would hate that. If you're claustrophobic, it's just not very good.
Oh,
But
so
I
cool.
find them just amazing for kind of freeing up your brain and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, just kind of paying attention to it as much as possible. And I think it's about working it into the day.
Do you
Uh,
fall asleep in the meditation tank, in the flotation tank?
do you know what? No, I don't
I
actually, which
did.
is
I did for about half my
weird.
time. Oh god,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think it's because I'm just so fascinated by what I'm thinking.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just too good. If you've not done one of those before, it's like you're in the dark, you're floating, so there's as few stimulus as possible, so your brain can really float away, and also the water supports every single muscle, so it's more relaxing even when you're lying down, because when you're lying down on a bed, you've still got muscles working, and this kind of holds you up, and it's good, but it's not for everyone because
No, no.
you're claustrophobic or
You
afraid of the
you ma
dark.
you you've made me
It's
you made me think back. I wanna find one in, near where I live. Um,
yeah.
we've got a couple more minutes, so I'll pick, let you pick actually. EQ, emotional intelligence, CQ, collaborative, cognitive, and cultural intelligence, that's diversity, equality, and inclusion. Resilience, RQ, brand quotient, or legacy quotient. Which one do you wanna give a thought for?
Let's go for resilience,
Okay.
actually.
Yeah.
I think that's
What's
interesting.
your learning on resilience and how you've picked yourself up in times of adversity and how important you think it is to talent in the future?
Yeah. So I think it's very important, but also misunderstood. So, as I said at the beginning, I have ADHD, and one of the things about ADHD is this thing where the rejection causes you physical pain. The smallest things can feel like the biggest rejection in the world, and I think because of that, um, sometimes even the smallest setbacks seem like the biggest setbacks ever. And I think
Mm.
it's actually helped me develop a lot of resilience because, I've always like, right, okay, let's absorb that, let's understand that. Then, we go again. We kind of like face the situation head on, find a different way, think about it differently. And I think it's kind of trained my brain to bounce back, think about things differently, and think about the way around things, or the way over things or under things, and just really kind of plotting out. Actually, I'm in control of this. It's like the way I think about things is what affects my brain. So, should I think about this thing differently? Do I see this threat as an opportunity? Just having that flexibility of thinking, I think, is really important. Um, I think the issue with resilience is in some cultures, in companies, it's kind of weaponized as well, being resilient means that we can do horrible things, and you always have to turn up and do it and all this sort of stuff. And I think there's a brilliant book by Bruce Daisley about resilience. I can't quite remember the title, but it's fantastic. Where he kind of breaks that down, but then thinks about how people can really be resilient, and it's that sort of that sense of agency and purpose and things like that. So we absolutely need resilient people in our organizations, and we need to help people develop that. But resilience isn't the ability to shrug off companies doing really toxic things to,
Yeah.
to people and expecting them not to respond. So I think there's a real difference in what it means, and but how important it is.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people think they have to be over resilient, and
Yeah,
uh, then other people can be quite fragile. So I think that the skill is what they call anti-fragile. There's a
yeah,
particular
yeah,
term,
yeah.
which I quite like that approach. Um, and before we go on to the top tip, let's talk about executive teams and then a favorite book, because you've mentioned a few books already. So like me, you clearly read a lot. Um, when leaders have a toxic team or a talented member who happens to have gone toxic or has always been toxic, but is just revealing themselves like narcissists. Power doesn't corrupt; it reveals,
Yeah.
um, as we've seen only too well. Um, what do you find works well with dealing with a toxic team or an individual?
I think that you have to address it, and I think that you have a toxic individual who is in a genius mode at what they're supposed to do. So they perform brilliantly, or the feeling is they take the company to the next level. And I've seen this time and time and time again, where people are allowed to get away with toxic behavior because they're integral to the company. And I think what it's really important to do is to understand the collateral damage that that causes in terms of other people's time, retention of other people in the business, and it always will. It always will. And I think if you look at that person um, purely through the thing that they do brilliantly, which is why you want to hang on to them, you miss that kind of collateral damage. And I think understanding that collateral damage is really important. And if the individual understands it and actually they're being toxic because of things that they can change, their beliefs, or their thinking that this was required in the organization, then that's fine. But if they can't see it and they won't change, then I don't know a business that hasn't benefited from moving someone like that on in so many ways. And I think that's the thing. And I think it's just looking at it holistically rather than looking at that specific thing that they deliver for you that's really important.
You are so right. I think of a personal example when I was a managing director and there was another member of the senior team who was almost holding the company to ransom because he made more than other bits of the business. His business generated more. And when tackling the CEO about why have you not got rid of him, because he's living a life that is against all the values we espouse. He's toxic. He's a narcissist. He's a bully. Why have we gone? Oh well, he makes so much money for us. We really. And I said that's the wrong call. Anyway, luckily, CEO, not because of me, because of his own realization that he couldn't just lack the courage to deal with the toxic one, got rid of him. It was all quite a showdown. But the point was, we made even more money with his replacement.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
the team, the psychological safety that resulted, they all thrived. So never think that anybody is irreplaceable just because they're a narcissist and a bully and a psychopath, but they appear to be doing really well, because it's not sustainable. There's a cost to everyone around them. Penultimately, your favorite book and why you'd recommend it, if it's on inspired leadership or anything that might be helpful to people on talent, perhaps.
Yeah, I really struggle to recommend favorite books because I kind of absorb so many. It sort of changes. It kind of changes
Do you
over time.
listen or do you read?
I tend to listen to. I love reading, but I tend to listen to business books because I can just get through them and get through them quicker when
Yeah.
I'm walking everywhere. That's the that.
Yeah.
So, I tend to listen. If I really like the book, I might then go and buy the Kindle version and go back and mark up the bits that kind of go through it again. I mean, there's so many great books that I read over the last few years. I mean, the two that I pick out, I remember the Bruce Daisley book is called Fortitude. And I think that is a brilliant book. The other one might not be sort of that well known. It's a book called Anthrovision by Gillian Tett, I think her name is, and she's an anthropologist. So she's applying the discipline of anthropology to business. And it's just fascinating because I'm fascinated by human behavior and all this
I
sort of
am
stuff.
too.
It's just looking at how how that kind of works. That's a really good book.
Fantastic.
I would recommend everyone kind of reads it because it's just you don't normally apply that to business. So really interesting.
Wonderful. Which leads us nicely to you giving us, just explain who you are, what you do, and what your top leadership tip is in 2 minutes. Over to you.
Absolutely. So I'm Matt Alder. I run the Recruiting Future podcast, and I help businesses understand the future of talent. My top tip is all about cultural norms. So there are cultural norms in every organization, the way that things are always done, that kind of stuff. There are cultural norms in every industry, the way that these things are done, that kind of stuff. And I think that the one of the strongest things you can do as a leader is to question those, is to ask, why do we do this? Why is this there? Why do we do it like this? And I think very often, I would almost call this like workplace archaeology. You'll find that people don't know, or it's based on something that's no longer true. And then that kind of makes it easy to change and easy to be more effective. And I think some of the best examples of workplace archaeology is if you look at things like the save button on a computer that looks like a little diskette from however many years ago. Anyone under 40 has got no idea. That's what that is. So you've got these things that kind of just carry on. And I think externally to the business, if you understand these kind of cultural norms and how to challenge them, it makes disruption and adoption much easier, because sometimes you're you're having to address them in a different way than you think. So people might hold on to a certain behavior because of something that you've not thought of. So understanding and questioning those things about why do we do it this way, I think is one of the sort of the most impactful things that a leader can do.
Fantastic. Well, look, Matt, it's been an absolute joy having you on the Inspiring Leadership podcast. It was non-stop fun. And thank you very much. Keep doing the great work you're doing with your own podcast. And thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you.